A 24-hour diner, a missing waitress, and a customer who paid his bill with a $20 bill from 1970, 28 years before that money should have existed in 1998. When investigators finally uncovered what was hidden beneath Murphy's diner, they realized Vanessa Bishop hadn't just witnessed a crime. She had stumbled into something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's diner cast their familiar, harsh glow across the empty parking lot as Vanessa Bishop pulled her Honda Civic into the employee spot behind the building. It was 10:47 p.m. on October 15, 1998, and the autumn chill carried the scent of dying leaves through the Indiana air. Vanessa had been working the graveyard shift at Murphy's for 3 years, and she knew every sound the old building made, every quirk of the ancient coffee machine, every regular customer who wandered in during the lonely hours between midnight and dawn. At 28, Vanessa was saving money to finish her nursing degree at Indiana State. The night shift paid better than day work, and the tips from long-haul truckers were generous enough to make the sleep deprivation worthwhile. She was practical, responsible, and incredibly observant, qualities that made her an excellent waitress and would soon make her a target. Vanessa unlocked the employee entrance and stepped into the familiar warmth of the diner's back kitchen. Her co-worker Jenny Martinez was finishing the evening cleanup, humming softly as she wiped down the grill. Jenny was 42, a single mother who had worked at Murphy's since 1991, and she served as an unofficial mentor to the younger staff members. "Busy night?" Vanessa asked, tying her apron around her waist and checking the coffee levels in the industrial brewers. "Pretty typical for a Thursday," Jenny replied, hanging up her cleaning towel. "Had that creepy guy come in again around 9. You know, the one who always sits in booth 7 and stares at everyone." Vanessa nodded. She knew exactly who Jenny meant. The man was probably in his 50s, always wore the same faded brown jacket, and never ordered anything except black coffee and apple pie. He would sit for hours, rarely speaking, watching other customers with an intensity that made everyone uncomfortable. But he paid his bills, didn't cause trouble, and technically wasn't doing anything illegal. "Did he leave his usual 50-cent tip?" Vanessa asked with a wry smile. "Actually, that's the weird part," Jenny said, pulling on her coat. "He left a $20 bill for a $3 check. Didn't wait for change, just got up and walked out. When I looked at the money closer, something seemed off about it, but I couldn't figure out what." Jenny handed Vanessa the $20 bill. At first glance, it looked perfectly normal, but something about the paper texture felt different. The colors seemed slightly faded, and the serial number appeared to be formatted in an unusual way. Vanessa studied it for a moment, then shrugged and placed it in the register. Probably just an old bill that had been stored somewhere for years. "Have a good shift," Jenny said, heading for the door. "Oh, and the coffee machine in Section 3 is acting up again. You might need to jiggle the filter basket." As Jenny's car pulled out of the parking lot, Vanessa began her routine preparation for the long night ahead. She checked the condiment stations, restocked the pie display case, and made sure the cash register was properly organized. The diner fell into the familiar rhythm of late-night quiet, broken only by the occasional truck rumbling past on the highway. Murphy's Diner had been a landmark on Route 41 since 1952. Built in the classic American diner style with red vinyl booths, chrome fixtures, and a long counter with spinning stools, it served as a crucial stop for travelers crossing Indiana. The location was perfect for catching highway traffic, but isolated enough that help was never close during emergencies. The first customer of Vanessa's shift arrived at 11:23 p.m. Harold Kowalski, a regular trucker who stopped at Murphy's every 2 weeks while hauling auto parts from Detroit to Memphis. Harold was a reliable customer who always ordered the same meal: coffee, scrambled eggs, bacon, and wheat toast. He would eat quickly, leave a decent tip, and continue his journey without much conversation. "The usual, Harold?" Vanessa asked as he settled into his preferred booth near the window. "You know it," Harold replied with a tired smile. "Long haul tonight. Need to be in Memphis by noon tomorrow." Vanessa poured his coffee and submitted his order to the night cook, Miguel Santos, who worked in the back kitchen. Miguel was a quiet man in his 30s who spoke limited English, but prepared excellent food with remarkable consistency. He had been working at Murphy's for 5 years and had never missed a shift or caused any problems. As Harold ate his meal, Two more customers arrived. A young couple traveling from Chicago to Louisville stopped for coffee and directions. They were lost, slightly anxious about driving through unfamiliar territory at night, and grateful for Vanessa's friendly assistance with their roadmap. After 30 minutes and several cups of coffee, they paid their bill and continued their journey. The diner settled back into quiet routine. Harold finished his meal, left his usual $5 tip, and returned to his truck. Vanessa could see his headlights sweeping across the parking lot as he maneuvered back onto the highway. By 12:45 a.m., she was alone except for Miguel, who was cleaning the kitchen and preparing for the morning prep work. This was Vanessa's favorite time of the night. The solitude allowed her to study for her nursing classes, catch up on reading, or simply think about her future plans. She had been accepted to Indiana State's nursing program and would start classes in the spring semester. The night shift at Murphy's was supposed to be temporary, just a way to pay for tuition and living expenses. But Vanessa's peaceful study time was interrupted when the bell above the front door chimed at 1:17 a.m. She looked up from her textbook to see a man she had never encountered before. He was approximately 50 years old, wearing a dark overcoat despite the mild weather, and carrying what appeared to be a small leather briefcase. The stranger moved with deliberate precision, scanning the empty diner before selecting booth number 4, which offered clear views of both the front door and the kitchen entrance. Something about his demeanor immediately made Vanessa uneasy. His eyes were cold and calculating, and he seemed to be evaluating the diner's layout rather than looking for a place to sit and eat. "Good evening," Vanessa said, approaching his table with a menu and coffee pot. "Can I start you with some coffee?" "Coffee, black," the man replied without looking at the menu. His voice was soft but carried an undertone that made Vanessa's skin crawl. "And I'll need to see your guest register." Murphy's Diner maintained an old-fashioned guest register where customers could sign their names, particularly truckers who wanted to leave messages for other drivers. It was a quaint tradition that made the establishment feel more personal and community-oriented. "Of course," Vanessa said, retrieving the leather-bound register from behind the counter. "Are you looking for someone specific?" "Just browsing," the man said, accepting the register and studying recent entries with intense concentration. He spent several minutes reading through names and comments, occasionally making soft humming sounds as if recognizing specific individuals. Vanessa poured his coffee and stepped back, but something compelled her to watch him more closely. The way he held the register suggested familiarity with it, as if he had reviewed it before. His finger traced specific entries, and he seemed to be cross-referencing information with notes written in his briefcase. "Are you a regular customer?" Vanessa asked, trying to sound casual. "I don't think I've seen you before." "I travel through occasionally," the man replied, still focused on the register. "Business takes me to many small towns. Diners like this are excellent places to observe local patterns and gather information about communities." The response was technically innocent, but something about his phrasing felt threatening. Vanessa had worked with hundreds of travelers over the years, and most talked about their jobs, families, or destinations. This man spoke like he was conducting research rather than simply passing through. After 20 minutes of studying the guest register, the stranger closed it and handed it back to Vanessa. He had made several notes in his briefcase, though she couldn't see what he had written. He finished his coffee in silence, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen where Miguel was working. At 2:15 a.m., the man reached into his overcoat and pulled out his wallet to pay for his coffee. That's when Vanessa noticed something that would haunt her for the rest of her very short life. The $20 bill he placed on the table was identical to the one Jenny had described earlier. The same unusual texture, the same faded colors, the same strange serial number formatting. But this bill carried additional peculiarities that made Vanessa's blood run cold. The date printed on the currency read 1970, and the paper showed signs of aging that seemed inconsistent with normal circulation. More disturbing, the bill appeared to have been stored in conditions that had preserved it almost perfectly for 28 years. "Excuse me," Vanessa said, picking up the $20 bill and examining it more closely. "This money seems unusual. Where did you get currency this old?" The man's demeanor changed instantly. The polite traveler facade dropped away, replaced by something cold and dangerous. He stood slowly, his eyes fixed on Vanessa's face with predatory intensity. Old money has interesting stories, he said quietly. Sometimes it comes from places that no longer exist. Sometimes it belongs to people who are no longer alive to spend it. Vanessa felt her heart rate increasing as the full implication of his words settled in. The $20 bill wasn't just old, it was evidence. Evidence of something that connected the creepy regular customer Jenny had described to this mysterious stranger who seemed to know far too much about the diner's operations. "I think you should leave," Vanessa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your coffee is paid for. Have a safe trip." "I'm afraid leaving isn't possible yet," the man replied, moving closer to the counter. "You've seen something you shouldn't have seen. You've made connections you shouldn't have made. And now we need to discuss what happens next." Vanessa's hand moved instinctively toward the panic button installed beneath the cash register, but the stranger was watching her every movement with professional alertness. "Don't reach for the alarm," he said calmly. "There's no one to respond anyway. The nearest police patrol is 43 minutes away, and I've disabled your telephone lines. We're going to have a private conversation about your future employment here at Murphy's Diner." The stranger reached into his briefcase and pulled out several photographs, placing them face down on the counter between them. Vanessa could see that they were black and white surveillance photos, but she couldn't identify the subjects from her angle. "Do you know what these pictures show?" the man asked. Vanessa shook her head, afraid to speak. "They show previous employees of this establishment who became too curious about certain customers and their business activities. Women who noticed unusual money, asked inappropriate questions, or demonstrated excessive interest in matters that didn't concern them." He flipped over the first photograph. It showed a woman approximately Vanessa's age standing outside Murphy's Diner, apparently unaware she was being photographed. The woman was wearing a waitress uniform and appeared to be taking out trash after her shift. "Margaret Sullivan," the stranger said, "worked here from 1987 to 1989, started asking questions about customers who paid with old currency, disappeared during her shift on November 3rd, 1989. Never found." Vanessa's hands were trembling as he flipped over the second photograph. "Linda Rodriguez, worked here from 1992 to 1994, noticed irregularities in the cash register contents and tried to report them to management. Disappeared during her shift on August 17th, 1994. Never found." The third photograph showed another young waitress, this one standing beside a car in the diner's parking lot. "Patricia Chen, worked here from 1995 to 1997, discovered hidden materials in the basement storage area and threatened to contact authorities. Disappeared during her shift on June 22nd, 1997. Never found." Vanessa realized she was looking at documentation of a serial killing operation that had been using Murphy's Diner as a hunting ground for nearly a decade. The creepy regular customer wasn't just strange, he was marking potential victims. And this stranger wasn't a random traveler. He was the predator who had been systematically eliminating waitresses who discovered his activities. "What do you want from me?" Vanessa whispered. "I want you to understand that Murphy's Diner serves a special purpose beyond providing food to travelers," the man explained. "Certain customers require privacy, discretion, and absolute silence from the staff. In exchange for your cooperation, you'll be allowed to continue working here safely." "What if I refuse?" The stranger smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. "Then you'll join the other girls in the basement storage area. Permanently." Vanessa's mind raced as she tried to identify possible escape routes or ways to signal for help. The front door was blocked by the stranger's position. The back exit led through the kitchen where Miguel was working, but he might not understand English well enough to comprehend the danger. The phone lines were reportedly disabled, and her car keys were in her purse behind the counter. "I need to know you understand the situation completely," the stranger continued, pulling out a fourth photograph. This one showed the interior of what appeared to be a basement room with concrete walls and a single overhead light bulb. "This is where we conduct our business meetings. This is where previous employees learned about their new responsibilities. And this is where you'll be going if you choose not to cooperate with our arrangements." Vanessa stared at the photograph and realized she was looking at a makeshift prison cell. The concrete walls showed scratches and stains that suggested prolonged captivity and violence. A metal chair sat in the center of the room, equipped with restraints and what appeared to be torture implements. How many women have you killed? Vanessa asked, her voice barely audible. I prefer to think of it as employment termination, the stranger replied. When workers become unreliable or pose security risks to the operation, they must be replaced. You're going to be much more reliable than your predecessors, aren't you? Before Vanessa could respond, the bell above the front door chimed again. Both she and the stranger turned to see Harold Kowalski returning to the diner, apparently having forgotten something during his earlier visit. Sorry to bother you again, Harold called out as he approached the counter. Left my logbook in a booth 12. Just need to grab it real quick. The stranger's hand moved inside his overcoat, clearly reaching for a concealed weapon. His eyes shifted between Harold and Vanessa, calculating the new variables in his situation. Harold was a large, strong man who could potentially interfere with the stranger's plans, but he was also an innocent bystander who would now have to be eliminated to protect the operation. No problem, Harold, Vanessa said loudly, hoping her voice would alert him to the danger. Take your time looking for it. Harold moved toward booth 12, but something in Vanessa's tone made him pause and look more carefully at the scene. The stranger standing too close to the counter, the tension in Vanessa's posture, the photographs spread across the surface. Experienced truckers developed instincts about dangerous situations. Everything okay here? Harold asked, his hand resting casually on the CB radio clipped to his belt. Everything's fine, the stranger said, but his voice carried a clear warning. Just having a friendly conversation with the waitress about job responsibilities. Harold's eyes met Vanessa's, and she tried to communicate her desperation without alerting the stranger. Harold had served in Vietnam and recognized the look of someone in immediate mortal danger. He pressed the emergency button on his CB radio, sending a distress signal to other truckers monitoring Channel 19. The stranger realized what Harold had done and pulled a pistol from his overcoat. That was a mistake, he said calmly. Now both of you are going to the basement. But Harold Kowalski hadn't survived 2 tours in Southeast Asia by backing down from armed confrontations. He grabbed a coffee pot from the nearest table and hurled it at the stranger's gun hand, causing the weapon to discharge harmlessly into the ceiling. The gunshot shattered the front window and triggered a struggle that would determine whether Vanessa Bishop lived or died. Miguel Santos heard the gunshot from the kitchen and immediately understood that violence had erupted in the dining room. He grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet he had been cleaning and moved toward the sound of fighting. Miguel had worked in several dangerous neighborhoods before coming to Murphy's, and he wasn't about to let anyone hurt Vanessa. The struggle between Harold and the stranger was brief but vicious. Harold had size and military training, but the stranger was armed and desperate. They crashed into tables and chairs, sending dishes and silverware flying across the linoleum floor. Vanessa pressed the panic button beneath the cash register and tried to reach the telephone, hoping the lines weren't actually disabled. The phone was dead, but Vanessa realized the stranger had lied about the police response time. The gunshot and broken window would be visible from the highway, and other truckers monitoring Harold's CB radio would be calling for emergency assistance. Miguel emerged from the kitchen wielding the cast-iron skillet just as the stranger broke free from Harold's grip and retrieved his fallen pistol. The sight of a second opponent caused the stranger to reassess his situation. What had been a controlled operation was rapidly becoming a chaotic confrontation with multiple witnesses and potential responders. This is over, the stranger announced, pointing his pistol at Vanessa. All of you are coming to the basement now. But Harold had one final tactical advantage. During his struggle with the stranger, he had managed to grab the man's briefcase and scatter its contents across the floor. Among the papers and photographs was something that made Vanessa gasp in recognition. Spread across the diner floor were dozens of $20 bills, all identical to the one the stranger had used to pay for his coffee. Each bill was dated 1970, and each showed the same unusual aging patterns. But more disturbing, mixed in with the currency, were identification documents bearing different names and photographs. The stranger wasn't just a serial killer. He was collecting identities from his victims and using their possessions as trophies or tools for future crimes. The old money had belonged to previous victims, possibly waitresses from other diners who had been murdered years earlier. You've been doing this for decades, Vanessa realized. How many women have you killed? Enough to perfect the system, the stranger replied. But tonight's complications require a change in procedure. He fired 2 shots in rapid succession. Harold dove behind the counter, pulling Vanessa with him as bullets shattered coffee cups and embedded in the back wall. Miguel charged from the kitchen, swinging the cast iron skillet with determined fury. The stranger's third shot struck Miguel in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending the skillet clattering across the floor. But the impact wasn't fatal, and Miguel managed to crawl behind the service counter where Harold and Vanessa were taking shelter. "Kitchen," Miguel gasped, pressing his hand against his wounded shoulder. "Back door. Run." But the stranger had anticipated their escape route. As they moved toward the kitchen, he circled around the counter to block their path. His tactical training was evident in how he controlled the space and cut off their options. "Basement," he ordered, pointing toward a door near the back of the diner that Vanessa had always assumed led to storage areas. "All 3 of you, now." Harold looked at Vanessa and Miguel, calculating their chances of survival if they obeyed versus their chances if they continued fighting. The stranger clearly intended to kill them regardless, but compliance might buy time for rescue to arrive. The basement door opened onto a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air below smelled of dampness, decay, and something else that Vanessa didn't want to identify. As they descended under the stranger's armed supervision, Vanessa realized they were entering a purpose-built prison that had been constructed beneath the innocent-appearing diner. The basement was larger than the diner's footprint above, suggesting extensive excavation and construction work. The space was divided into several rooms, each serving a specific function in what appeared to be a sophisticated criminal operation. One room contained storage lockers filled with personal belongings, wallets, jewelry, clothing, and identification documents from dozens of victims. Another room housed surveillance equipment, monitoring the diner's interior and exterior. Multiple television screens showed live feeds from hidden cameras positioned throughout the building. Vanessa realized that every customer, every conversation, every interaction had been recorded and analyzed for months or possibly years. But the most horrifying discovery was the room the stranger directed them toward, a concrete chamber equipped with metal chairs, restraints, and tools for prolonged interrogation. The walls showed stains and scratch marks that told the story of previous victims who had been brought to this underground prison. "Welcome to the real Murphy's Diner," the stranger said, gesturing for them to sit in the metal chairs. "This is where we conduct our actual business." Harold refused to sit, positioning himself between the stranger and the wounded Miguel. "What kind of business?" "Information brokerage," the stranger explained, as if discussing a legitimate profession. "Travelers share remarkable secrets during late-night conversations. Lonely people confess fascinating details about their lives, their families, their vulnerabilities. We collect that information and sell it to interested parties." Vanessa began to understand the scope of the criminal enterprise. Murphy's Diner wasn't just a rest stop. It was a data collection center where predators gathered intelligence about potential victims across multiple states. "The waitresses who worked here before me," Vanessa said, "they discovered what you were doing. They became liabilities," the stranger confirmed. "Margaret learned about our financial arrangements with certain customers. Linda discovered our surveillance equipment. Patricia found our storage areas. Each woman had to be replaced when she demonstrated poor judgment about maintaining operational security." "You're not going to get away with this," Harold said. "My CB radio signal reached at least 12 other trucks. Police are already on their way." The stranger checked his watch and smiled. "Local police response time to this location averages 37 minutes. State police response time averages 51 minutes. We have plenty of time to relocate our operation and eliminate the witnesses." But the stranger had made a critical miscalculation about Harold Kowalski's military experience in CB radio network. Truckers had their own informal emergency response system, and Harold's distress signal had reached drivers who were already much closer than any official law enforcement. The sound of heavy trucks pulling into the parking lot above echoed through the basement. Diesel engines, air brakes, and multiple CB radios created a cacophony that indicated Harold's rescue had arrived. The stranger's expression shifted from confidence to alarm as he realized his isolated crime scene was about to become very crowded. "Time to go," he said, pointing his pistol toward a secondary exit Vanessa hadn't noticed. "There's a tunnel that leads to the highway drainage system. We'll use it to reach my vehicle." But as they moved toward the tunnel entrance, a new sound filled the basement, the unmistakable noise of heavy footsteps on the stairs leading down from the diner. Harold's trucker friends had arrived, and they were armed with tire irons, crowbars, and the kind of practical weapons that professional drivers always carried. "Federal agents," a voice shouted from the staircase. "Everyone on the ground." Vanessa was confused by the announcement until she realized that one of the responding truckers was actually an off-duty FBI agent who happened to be driving through the area when Harold's distress call came over the CB radio. Agent Robert Turner had been investigating a series of missing person cases across the Midwest and had immediately recognized the significance of Harold's description of the situation at Murphy's Diner. The stranger fired 3 shots toward the staircase, then grabbed Vanessa and pressed the gun to her head. "I'm leaving through the tunnel," he announced. "Anyone who follows me will cause this woman's death." But Agent Turner had experience with hostage situations and wasn't intimidated by the threat. "Robert Cramer," he called out, using the stranger's real name. "We've been tracking your operation for 8 months. The tunnel exit is already covered. There's nowhere to run." Vanessa felt the stranger's grip tighten as he realized his identity had been compromised. Robert Cramer was a professional killer who had been operating across multiple states since the 1970s, using roadside establishments to identify and eliminate victims. The FBI had connected him to disappearances in Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, and Indiana, but had never been able to locate his base of operations. 8 months, Cramer said. "Impossible. My security measures are flawless." "Jenny Martinez has been working with us since February," Agent Turner revealed. "Every customer interaction, every suspicious incident, every unusual detail has been reported and analyzed. We know about your surveillance system, your victim storage areas, and your tunnel network." The revelation hit Vanessa like a physical blow. Jenny, her mentor and friend, had been an undercover FBI informant the entire time. The evening shift worker who had trained her, shared jokes with her, and warned her about creepy customers had actually been investigating a serial killer operation. Kramer's hostage situation deteriorated rapidly as FBI tactical teams emerged from multiple access points. The tunnel he had planned to use for escape was blocked by agents who had been positioning themselves for weeks. The basement that had served as his secure base of operations was now surrounded by federal law enforcement. "Release the hostage," Agent Turner commanded. "Your operation is finished." Instead of surrendering, Cramer made a final desperate decision. He shoved Vanessa toward the federal agents and ran toward what appeared to be a dead-end wall. But the wall contained a hidden panel that opened into another tunnel system, one that even the FBI hadn't discovered during their surveillance operation. Cramer disappeared into the hidden passage, leaving behind his briefcase, photographs, and the evidence that would finally reveal the full scope of his crimes. Agent Turner immediately radioed for additional units to cover all possible exit points while paramedics treated Miguel's gunshot wound. As dawn broke over Murphy's Diner, the full magnitude of the criminal operation became clear. The basement investigation revealed evidence of at least 15 murders committed over a 12-year period. Cramer had been using roadside diners across the Midwest to identify vulnerable women, collect personal information about travelers, and eliminate anyone who threatened his activities. The $20 bills from 1970 were traced to a bank robbery in Detroit that had never been solved. Cramer had been using stolen currency from previous crimes to pay for services at the diners, creating a paper trail that connected him to multiple unsolved cases spanning decades. Vanessa survived because of Harold Kowalski's military training, Miguel Santos' courage, and Jenny Martinez's months of undercover investigation. But she also survived because she asked the right questions about unusual money and recognized the danger before it was too late to escape. The search for Robert Cramer continued for 3 weeks before his body was found in an abandoned farm building 30 miles from Murphy's Diner. He had apparently died from injuries sustained during his escape through the tunnel system, bringing an end to one of the longest-running serial killer investigations in FBI history. The hidden tunnel network beneath Murphy's Diner was mapped and documented, revealing a sophisticated underground system that connected to multiple buildings and drainage systems across the county. Cramer had spent years preparing escape routes and hiding places that allowed him to operate with virtual impunity. Jenny Martinez revealed that she had been recruited by the FBI after her sister disappeared from a diner in Illinois under circumstances similar to those at Murphy's. Her undercover assignment had been to infiltrate the operation and gather evidence while protecting other potential victims. I hated lying to you, Jenny told Vanessa during a debriefing session, but we knew Cramer was selecting his next victim, and we needed someone inside to document his methods and protect the staff. Vanessa learned that she had been under FBI protection for weeks without knowing it. Agents had been monitoring the diner, tracking Cramer's activities, and preparing to intervene if he made a move against any of the employees. The basement beneath Murphy's Diner was sealed and converted into a memorial for the women who had been murdered there. The families of Margaret Sullivan, Linda Rodriguez, Patricia Chen, and 12 other victims finally received closure after years of uncertainty and false hope. Murphy's Diner was closed permanently and later demolished. The site is now occupied by a highway rest area with enhanced security measures and direct communication links to law enforcement agencies. A small plaque near the information kiosk honors the memory of the women who died there and the courage of those who brought their killer to justice. Vanessa Bishop completed her nursing degree and now works as a trauma counselor specializing in helping survivors of violent crime. She frequently speaks to law enforcement groups about recognizing the warning signs of predatory behavior and the importance of trusting instincts when something feels wrong. Harold Kowalski received the FBI's Civilian Service Award for his role in stopping Robert Cramer and saving Vanessa's life. He continued driving long-haul routes until his retirement in 2015. But he never stopped at 24-hour diners alone after dark. Miguel Santos recovered fully from his gunshot wound and now owns a successful restaurant in Indianapolis. He credits his survival to the quick thinking of his coworkers and the bravery of strangers who risked their lives to help people they had never met. Agent Robert Turner led the task force that identified and closed 17 similar operations across 8 states. The investigation revealed that roadside diners, truck stops, and other isolated business establishments had been systematically infiltrated by criminal organizations seeking to exploit the vulnerability of travelers and workers. The case files from Murphy's Diner became training materials for FBI Academy students studying serial killer psychology and organized crime infiltration techniques. The basement surveillance system provided unprecedented insight into how predators identify, evaluate, and select their victims over extended periods. But perhaps the most important lesson from Vanessa Bishop's story isn't about criminal psychology or investigative techniques. It's about the power of ordinary people to recognize danger and take action to protect others, even when the risks are enormous. When Vanessa noticed unusual money and asked questions about it, she was following the same instincts that had kept humans safe for thousands of years. When Harold Kowalski trusted his gut feeling that something was wrong and used his CB radio to call for help, he was demonstrating the kind of community solidarity that makes civilization possible. When Miguel Santos grabbed a kitchen implement and charged an armed killer to protect his coworker, he was showing the kind of moral courage that separates heroes from bystanders. And when Jenny Martinez spent months working undercover to protect women she had never met, she was exemplifying the dedication of law enforcement officers who risk everything to serve and protect their communities. The $20 bill from 1970 that started this entire investigation sits in the FBI's evidence archives, a reminder that sometimes the smallest details can expose the largest crimes. The currency that Robert Cramer thought would help him blend in with normal customers actually became the thread that unraveled his entire operation. Today, enhanced communication systems, improved surveillance technology, and better coordination between law enforcement agencies make operations like Cramer's much more difficult to sustain. But the fundamental lesson remains. Evil succeeds when good people choose to ignore warning signs and mind their own business. Vanessa Bishop chose to ask questions about unusual money. Harold Kowalski chose to trust his instincts about danger. Miguel Santos chose to fight back against armed violence. Jenny Martinez chose to risk her life working undercover for months. Each decision, taken individually, might have seemed insignificant, but together they brought down a serial killer who had been operating with impunity for over a decade. The next time you're in a 24-hour diner late at night, remember Vanessa Bishop's story. Pay attention to the other customers. Notice who's watching too carefully. Trust your instincts if something feels wrong. And remember that sometimes asking the right questions about the wrong customer can save lives, including your own. Because somewhere out there, another predator might be paying with old money watching too carefully, and planning to make sure that the next person who notices unusual details never gets the chance to ask questions about them. The basement beneath Murphy's Diner is gone now, sealed and forgotten beneath concrete and asphalt. But the memory of the women who died there lives on in the training programs, safety protocols, and investigative techniques that protect workers and travelers across the country. Evil thought it could hide in plain sight, using the cover of an innocent roadside diner to hunt victims and eliminate witnesses. But truth has a way of surfacing, even when it's buried beneath tons of concrete and years of carefully maintained lies. Vanessa Bishop's story reminds us that heroes aren't always people in uniforms carrying badges. Sometimes they're waitresses who ask questions about unusual money, truckers who trust their instincts about danger, and kitchen workers who grab skillets to protect their friends. The $20 bill from 1970 that should never have existed in 1998 became the key that unlocked a criminal operation spanning multiple states and decades. Sometimes the smallest anomaly reveals the largest conspiracy. Sometimes a single question about old money can bring down an entire network of killers. And sometimes in the fluorescent lit dining room of a 24-hour diner, ordinary people find the courage to confront extraordinary evil and win. But here's the question that haunts investigators to this day. How many other Robert Cramers are out there right now using innocent-looking businesses as hunting grounds? How many diners, gas stations, and truck stops across America are hiding similar basement operations where predators collect information and eliminate threats? The FBI estimates that Kramer's network extended far beyond Murphy's Diner. They found evidence suggesting at least 47 similar operations across 19 states, each using the same methodology of infiltrating roadside businesses and targeting vulnerable workers. Which brings us to a disturbing question for you to consider. When was the last time you really looked at the people watching you in a restaurant? When did you last notice if a customer seemed too interested in other people's conversations? Are you confident that the seemingly innocent late-night establishments you visit are actually what they appear to be? If this story left you questioning everything you thought you knew about roadside safety and the people who might be watching from the shadows, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We dive deep into cases like this every week, uncovering the truth behind disappearances that seemed impossible to solve. Leave a comment below and tell us, do you think Jenny Martinez was right to work undercover for months without telling Vanessa the truth? Should she have warned her that she was potentially being targeted by a serial killer, even if it meant compromising the FBI investigation? Or do you believe that keeping Vanessa in the dark was the only way to protect her and gather the evidence needed to stop Robert Cramer permanently? Would you have made the same choice Jenny did, or would you have found a way to warn your coworker about the danger she was facing? The moral complexity of undercover operations like this continues to spark debate among law enforcement professionals and ethicists. There's no easy answer to whether protecting one person justifies deceiving another, especially when that deception might mean the difference between life and death. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you side with Jenny's decision to prioritize the investigation? Or do you think Vanessa deserved to know the truth about the danger she was facing? And most importantly, if you work the night shift at a 24-hour diner and notice something suspicious about a customer, would you have the courage to ask the questions that might save lives? Remember to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove reality is often stranger and more terrifying than fiction. Until next time, stay safe out there, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to ask questions when something doesn't feel right. Because sometimes asking the right question about the wrong customer can mean the difference between becoming a victim and becoming a survivor. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Diner cast their familiar, harsh glow across the empty parking lot as Vanessa Bishop pulled her Honda Civic into the employee spot behind the building. It was 10:47 p.m. on October 15th, 1998, and the autumn chill carried the scent of dying leaves through the Indiana air. Vanessa had been working the graveyard shift at Murphy's for 3 years, and she knew every sound the old building made, every quirk of the ancient coffee machine, every regular customer who wandered in during the lonely hours between midnight and dawn. At 28, Vanessa was saving money to finish her nursing degree at Indiana State. The night shift paid better than day work, and the tips from long-haul truckers were generous enough to make the sleep deprivation worthwhile. She was practical, responsible, and incredibly observant, qualities that made her an excellent waitress and would soon make her a target. Vanessa unlocked the employee entrance and stepped into the familiar warmth of the diner's back kitchen. Her co-worker, Jenny Martinez, was finishing the evening cleanup, humming softly as she wiped down the grill. Jenny was 42, a single mother who had worked at Murphy's since 1991, and she served as an unofficial mentor to the younger staff members. "Busy night?" Vanessa asked, tying her apron around her waist and checking the coffee levels in the industrial brewers. "Pretty typical for a Thursday," Jenny replied, hanging up her cleaning towel. "Had that creepy guy come in again around 9. You know, the one who always sits in booth 7 and stares at everyone." Vanessa nodded. She knew exactly who Jenny meant. The man was probably in his 50s, always wore the same faded brown jacket, and never ordered anything except black coffee and apple pie. He would sit for hours, rarely speaking, watching other customers with an intensity that made everyone uncomfortable. But he paid his bills, didn't cause trouble, and technically wasn't doing anything illegal. "Did he leave his usual 50-cent tip?" Vanessa asked with a wry smile. "Actually, that's the weird part," Jenny said, pulling on her coat. "He left a $20 bill for a $3 check. Didn't wait for change, just got up and walked out. When I looked at the money closer, something seemed off about it, but I couldn't figure out what." Jenny handed Vanessa the $20 bill. At first glance, it looked perfectly normal, but something about the paper texture felt different. The colors seemed slightly faded, and the serial number appeared to be formatted in an unusual way. Vanessa studied it for a moment, then shrugged and placed it in the register. Probably just an old bill that had been stored somewhere for years. "Have a good shift," Jenny said, heading for the door. "Oh, and the coffee machine in section 3 is acting up again. You might need to jiggle the filter basket."